are back. First podcast 2025. Collin Bosse, Krista Kingston, and Christian Conlon, and myself, Joe Conlon. This is Krista's first time back in a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely for 2025, that's for sure.
Definitely 2025. It's been, I think we had actually stopped since 2023, spring of 2023, so you probably haven't done it since around then.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Did we have a guest on last time you did it?
Might have been David Burham.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
Love
I
you,
think that might have been the last
Shout
one.
out, David. All right, so today we're gonna do some myth-busting questions on real estate, just to kind of have some fun with some of the myths that are out there. But before we start, I think we have a fun announcement to make. Krista surprised us over the holidays in a fun manner. We couldn't say anything until she released the news to her family, but Krista is expecting her first child in June.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Crazy.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to wait to find out the gender?
Yep.
You think you can do it?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think so.
It's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best. It's
Yeah.
exciting.
Exciting either way, so we don't really care.
You guys are excited, obviously.
Yeah.
And nervous.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome. But
Yeah, exactly.
We're excited for her, and we will keep everybody posted. Put your bets in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, girl.
Boy or girl. All right, we're going to do some myth-busting questions for the real estate industry, starting off with, this is just ChatGPT questions here that are going to guide us through. We have, you need 20% down to buy a home. So there is a myth that you need 20% down to purchase a home. Good thing we have a mortgage guy here.
Yeah, so get this one all the time. With 20%, the actual rule is when you're buying an investment property outright and you're going to rent it out right away, that's when it's mandatory to have 20% down. But whether it's your first home that you're living in, your second, third, fourth, minimum down is 5%. There is default insurance for any mortgages under 20% down, but big myth, a lot of people are fearful because they have to save for 20%, and especially with today's sale prices, may seem like a forever never plan, but 5% is a lot more reasonable. So
now there is an exception to that. You do have to put more than 5% down over certain amounts of money.
Yes, so 5% on the first 500,000, and then 10% thereafter between 500 to $1 million. So it gets prorated. So give an example, property for 600,000 would be 35,000 compared to 30,000.
Yeah. So there is some truth to, after a certain amount, it can get up to as much as 20%, but it is not 20%, especially for the first time home buyer price ranges.
Yeah. And rules have been changing too, real quick, with properties over $1 million. Used to be mandatory 20% minimum. They have been changing it. CMHC is now allowing up to 1.5 million with default insured. So it is more flexible. Obviously, it's a higher price range for people affording that. But
now I have clients that have been able to get away with less than 20% down on their second home.
Yes.
So on the second home, is it possible to do 5 or 10%?
Absolutely.
Now, what if it is for investment purposes?
So the way to process that is if you're converting your existing home into an investment property and you're moving into that second home. As long as you're claiming it as your primary residence, you can get away with the 5% minimum or whatever the math works out to. But when you're converting the existing unit and say you put 5% down, no one's going to ask you for a higher down payment. That is now an investment property. So now you have an investment property and a home.
Cool.
But again, if you're purchasing the investment property outright, has to be minimum 20%.
There was one thing that I could actually touch on here, because this was actually something that I feel like is on the same topic of a down payment, because this is something that I learned coming into the business, and I would assume many people don't know prior to purchasing their first house, or even kind of up and until you kind of start that, finalizing of financing, which is, yes, you're putting 5% down, but a question that I would love for you to kind of explain to everybody is at what percentage of that 5% is in fact going down on the home in comparison to what is being paid out to the insurer to make sure that the mortgage doesn't default.
Yeah. So the best calculator I use out there, it's right on realtor.ca. You can go through the app or the website, but as soon as you click on mortgage calculator, it gives you a breakdown if you put 5%, 10%, 20%. And oftentimes the percentage for the default insurance is around 2, 3, maybe 4%. So sometimes people will say, well, I put 5% down, but now I'm getting charged that on my default insurance. So sometimes it almost comes out in the wash to be the same amount. Usually it's a bit less, but playing around with those calculators gives it a good illustration.
Yeah. Always encourage people to kind of just like play around with that sort of stuff. Like, especially my clients, like if you're trying to get comfortable with the monthly that you have in your mind, and then, you know, your budget goes up a little bit, goes down a little bit, consistently just kind of running those numbers amongst yourself or you and your partner, whoever it is you're purchasing that property with. Always a good idea, just like hop on and just punch away for an hour or two and just kind of get comfortable with the idea of how this is actually going to work when, you know, pen is placed on paper.
Yeah, it's a good point too, because you don't have to pay that default insurance out of pocket or with cash. So you can use your cash for your down payment, but the default insurance gets added back on top of your mortgage, which then increases your monthly payment. So if you're budgeting for something lower, you don't want to get caught off guard. So
So for those of you that are saving for 20% down on your first home, please reach out to Collin Bosse. It is not needed. You can put 5% down or 10% down, 15% down, but it does not have to be 20% down. Krista, spring is always the best time to buy.
So always, not always. So there's pros and cons to every market, really. The biggest thing is in spring, obviously you get a lot of inventory. So you have a lot more options to choose from. However, a lot of times buyers also are jumping into the market as well. So it can be a lot of, you know, competition. But really the biggest thing is I always just tell people, look at your life and look at kind of what makes sense for you. And then there's pros and cons to every market. So do you want to sell like maybe during the week of Christmas? Not necessarily, but if you find the most absolutely perfect house and you got it for an amazing price, it might be worth putting your house on the market and seeing if you can kind of work it out. So
yeah, we kind of touched on it a bit in the podcast I think we did with Steve in regards to timing of the year. But yeah, I mean, spring comes with the benefit of more product to choose from, but obviously it doesn't always mean the best deals, the best prices. I find end of summer, in August, September seems to be a sweet spot where you have a good inventory, but also you seem to be getting less competition. But by the time you get to September, October, the average sale price may be higher than it was back in November the year before. So it really is all dependent on when you're starting your search. So, and when the right house comes along, the right house may come along right through the holidays, like you said, which makes
and
it
I think
the best
that's
time
the
to buy.
biggest thing too, is that if it's kind of on your radar, like I always encourage people to just start looking, because you never really know when that perfect house is going to come up, and you would hate for it to come up and you're not prepared. So I'd rather get you started on a search a little bit earlier, get your feet wet, go out and see houses and kind of figure out what exactly you're looking for. And then by the time the right house does come up, you're not scrambling. So yeah, it's again, maybe there's in everyone's mind, they think there's a perfect time. There's really not. It depends what works for you guys.
If the question was, is spring always the best time to sell? I would say
That might,
statistically,
be
I would
a different
say
question.
Statistically, early to mid spring is usually the better time to sell. It's when the market is the most active and competitive. But even then, that's not always the case. But when it comes to buying, I think all throughout the year there's opportunities. So I don't think there's any right or wrong time to buy. It really depends on the current market conditions that we're in.
But I'll put a plug in too, just to always get your pre-approval ahead of time. Like
Yes.
Krista said.
Oh,
Yeah.
shut it.
I'm just saying.
It's true though.
'Cause
It's
all
true.
the time I'll deal with clients that are like, oh, I'm going to wait till the spring, or I'm going to wait till the summer.
And then the right one
well,
pops
then
up.
all of a sudden the right one pops up, and now we're scrambling to get all your paperwork through. And
We should get a Collin Bosse like sticker that floats by the screen every time a plug goes in. Just like
CB mortgage.
No, but you are right. You should always have if you are
For sure.
thinking that it's possible that you could be buying in the next 90 days, you should always have some sort of pre-approval on standby, because you can always renew it at the end.
Well, exactly. And it's funny. I think people are hesitant to start that process because they think that once they start, they have to like really dive in. And it's like, no, you can, get it renewed if
No
you need
cost,
to.
no commitment.
It's exactly. And same with working with us, right? Like, I mean, we're happy to show a couple houses if it's going to make you feel a little bit more comfortable about the situation, even if you're not 100% ready at the time we're doing it. So
Going back to
all the
the
education.
the myth of the 20% down, just to kind of piggyback on both those topics, a lot of people are waiting for rates to come down before they get their pre-approval, but there's nothing stopping them from getting a pre-approval now. And your rate, if the rates go up, you're at least locked in. And if the rates were to go down, you can adjust it as you go.
And that myth is somewhat true, just because depending on the lender, what'll happen is they'll hold a rate for 4 months, and they're basically, wherever they're borrowing their money from, whether it's a financial institution or a private broker, they'll mitigate that risk and hold that rate at that time. So some people may say, oh, we locked in at this rate, you're stuck for the next 4 months, I'm not going to give you a discount. I will always give a discount.
You heard it here first, folks.
Because as rates go down, that's the right thing to do. It's a very competitive market out there, so there's a lot of lower rates. But it's really good when rates are rising, because then for 4 months at a time, you can hold on to that lower rate as rates climb. So, but good one.
Cristiano, you should always buy instead of rent. This is an interesting one because it's kind of contradicting to our profession as real estate agents, but
no, I mean, like, I think this is, you know, as many of these are going to be, I'm sure, is completely circumstantial, right? Like, you should always rent, or sorry, you should always buy instead of rent. Doesn't fit every, you know, circumstance. So there's going to be instances where, you know, whether it's on the financing side of things or just like, you know, particular to where you are in your life at that point in time. I think a lot of people kind of see, you know, renting as you are essentially, you know, putting money into someone else's pocket, or, you know, at the end of the day, you're not necessarily gaining any sort of, you know, profit on your investment here. But at the same time, there's pros to it as well. Like, the biggest thing for me, and like one of the biggest reasons why I would even consider renting, is probably just from a liability standpoint. You know, is if you're a good standing tenant, you're someone who's going to take care of the property as though it's your own. There's, you know, little to no chance that there's going to be something that's going to come back on you in terms of cost. So if I'm, you know, renting something and, you know, the AC goes, furnace goes, roof needs to be replaced, you know, depending, you know, on the situation with your landlord, most of the time that will not be left on a tenant's shoulders to take care of, right? So I would say that's probably the biggest thing. But, you know, it's again, like, if you're, you know, maybe I want to, like, I rented for a year when I went out to British Columbia. I'm not going to buy something. It makes 0 sense, not to mention the affordability out there is far and away from what I could afford at the time. But again, like, it was what worked for me at the time. And similarly, if someone's coming down to Windsor from Toronto for, you know, border services or, you know, whatever the case may be, you know, renting is going to make more sense. I'm not going to make, you know, a $30,000, $40,000 down payment and make that sort of commitment and that sort of investment and just fingers crossed that when it's my time to go, the market's up and I make some sort of money, you know, or even worse, you lose money. And that was just simply because you thought that renting was the wrong decision. So completely circumstantial naturally, but pros and cons to both. But of course, if it's a long-term thing, you know, you start stacking up those monthly rents on an annual basis and you extrapolate that over 3, 4, 5 years, it's going to hurt when that calculator starts adding up those values for you and you see that you just paid $25,000 over 2 years for something that is not yours.
Right? Yeah.
Now, I know a lot of people that own multiple properties but rent. And it really just, again, depends on that, like you said, lifestyle. There's people that want to own real estate, but they don't want to live in their real estate because their profession is always on the move in different cities, or but they want to have those real estate investments. But it doesn't make sense to have a real estate investment that's going to be vacant half the time. So rather than living in your own property, you rent out your property, you collect a monthly cash flow, and then you use that cash flow to supplement your rent that you're renting somewhere else. But then that gives you the freedom to move around the country or the world, depending on what you're doing. And then it also allows you to have that asset that's going to grow and appreciate hopefully over time. Now, should you buy over renting? If you can afford it, it is smarter, like Christian was saying, to buy rather than just throwing the money to the landlord and paying their bills and their mortgage. There's 3 different incomes you can have from owning a home. So obviously, if you're not paying rent, that's huge. But when you are renting a home or you own the home, but let's say it's a rental, the first income is your tenant is paying down your mortgage. The second income is monthly cash flow. Hopefully you're positive. And then the third is the appreciation on the property. So as it's being paid down, it's appreciating over time. And then you also have a tenant that's putting hopefully monthly cash flow in your pocket on top of that. So owning a home, owning a rental is a good investment to make. But again, if your life is not giving you an opportunity to buy, it doesn't mean you have to go out there and buy and put yourself in a position where you're living paycheck to paycheck or putting yourself into financial trouble. So renting sometimes is the option, and there's nothing wrong with renting. But if you can afford to buy, obviously we're big advocates of that. But yeah, I think it really depends. And again, you can own homes and rent at the same time. So it's interesting. Krista, your credit score needs to be perfect to buy a home.
So I'm gonna assume this is more of a Collin question, but yeah,
Actually, that's true. That could be more of a Collin question.
I'm sure it doesn't have to be.
You know what? I'm gonna give this one to Collin because I kind of like the next one for you.
Okay.
All right. All right, Collin. You're yeah.
So credit
I
score.
can guess.
I just feel like Collin's got way too many plugs in here. RBC mortgage, RBC mortgages, mortgage specialist, hashtag Collin Bosse, extravaganza.
But this is why we work
Bonanza.
together. We have experts in different fields.
That's
so
right.
You don't have to do it. So with credit scores, as long as you're around 600 or above, you're going to be just fine. About 5-10 years ago, Canadians had no clue what their credit score was, and anytime you inquired or checked, it actually brought your score down. So people were prevented from checking it all the time. Now you can go onto your online banking, you could check on Credit Karma. The biggest difference is if you have a credit score over 600, you're most likely going to get a better rate. If you're under 600, it just shows that with the history of the items you've been paying, like credit cards, lines of credits, car loans, if you've had any lates or you're not responsible making your payments on time, there's higher risk to loan you more amounts of money. So in exchange with the risk, you're going to take on a higher interest rate. So you're either going to go with maybe a broker, B lender, or private lender. But once you're above that 600 range, and all you have to do is pay your items on time all the time, you're going to be able to do with a lender and get a better interest rate. So again, a lot of people say, I need to wait till my credit score improves just till I run an application. But the best part is we work together to help educate and say, this is what your situation is now. Now we know, and this is how you're going to improve. So there's no sense kind of hiding or preventing an application, but higher the score, the better.
Yeah. See, I knew he'd have a good answer for that.
Yeah, it sounded good.
All right.
Locked and loaded.
Krista would have killed that.
I'm like, I don't know the numbers. But that was great. That was good. And you know what? Truthfully, in real life too, if a client came to me asking these questions, I would be like, you know what? I'm going to send you to my friend Collin. He knows so much more about this than I do.
That's fair. That's fair.
It's your
All right.
forte, not mine.
Krista, a bigger home is always a better investment.
So yeah, not necessarily. Again, I think it comes down to lifestyle. Depends what you're looking to do. Obviously, if you're looking on like maybe having a generational home where there's maybe multiple families living in a home, you're moving in your parents or something like that. Who knows? Maybe that makes a little bit more sense. But typically, a smaller home is a little bit easier to maintain. Property taxes are likely lower. Typically, resale is pretty good because you're in that kind of first-time buyer range where you're going to have a lot of competition. Higher priced homes are, especially right now, a little bit slower, take a little bit longer to sell. You might end up taking a little bit of a discount because you might not have the same, amount of action on the property. So, again, depends on your lifestyle, but
Actually, that was very well said. I didn't even think of the fact that, with the interest rates right now, the resale is very difficult.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are getting burned and coming down quite a bit in price right now.
Well, and it's tough too, because I think a lot of people are in a position where they're like, my house is okay, so why would I move if my situation's all right? And in that kind of scenario, when the right house comes up, they're not going to stretch quite as far to reach what maybe the seller's looking for. They're maybe more like, no, I want you to come down to my price. So again, you may not just see that return on investment the same way you're hoping for, depending on the market.
And also, if the market were to drop, it's a percentage wise, it's a lesser hit on a smaller priced home, where the larger priced homes you can get hit pretty hard if the market goes in the wrong direction. And definitely like more upkeep, more maintenance throughout. And
well, and I always think too, like with the smaller like first time buyer homes, I'll call it, there's always multiple streams of purchasers for that. There's first time buyers, there's investors, there's retirees. They're all kind of all falling into that same category, fighting over that same type of property. When you have a higher priced home, you typically are really only marketing one. So there is a big benefit to having that smaller home, just because you're typically getting attention from more buyer pools.
And if you were to lose your job or need to downsize and you couldn't get the home sold, you always have the option of renting, but it's much harder to rent a larger home for something that's close to.
And then
break
that's
even.
scary too,
Right.
because you want a tenant that's actually going to take care of your investment, especially when it is on the higher price point.
Yeah. So bigger home, not always a better investment. Every home has its, and every price range has its investment opportunities. It's just a matter of what's fair and current market value. You can't buy. I'm going to skip that one because I'm going to go back to Collin on that. But Collin's getting way too much spotlight here. All home renovations increase property value. I'll give that one to Christian.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good one. I think this is a very commonly asked question, especially when I'm in listing appointments. I'm sure you guys can relate. You start having those preliminary conversations in regard to putting the house up for sale, and people start asking those questions as to like, what should I get done? Should I redo my kitchen countertop? Should I renovate my washroom? Should I redo the floors in the living room, etc.? And at the end of the day, I think the big misconception and the thing that, people really just need to understand is that you could make something that is, as luxurious or as comfortable as possible for you. But the problem is that it is for you, right? So I would kind of shy away from things such as finishes in certain circumstances. If you're looking to move, I would say maybe focus on those big ticket items if you can, right? Things like if you drive up to the house and the driveway's in shambles and you're debating between redoing the concrete on your driveway or your patio in comparison to redoing kitchen countertops, naturally neither one are inexpensive. But I would say that if you pull up in a driveway that is, cracked and is falling apart on you, it's one of those first things as soon as a buyer steps out of the door of their car. It's one of the first impressions that they're getting, right? And similarly, a roof or gutters or, things that are going to be a little bit less subjective. Not to say that you can't renovate a washroom and people aren't going to appreciate it. It's just, I think people say, well, if I spend $20,000-$30,000 on a renovation, I want to make sure I see that back on my sale price. And that's just not a promise that a realtor can make, nor anyone can really make, regardless of who it is. I think that, money can be spent for sure getting your house prepped and ready to rock. If you have pink tile all over the place, naturally, if you replace it with something a little bit more. if you replace it with something that's a little bit more up to date, I feel like you may capture a larger audience. But at the same time, literally what Chris has just said, there will be people who will step in those washrooms and be like, this has a ton of character. I like the way it looks. I like the way it feels. But I feel like focusing more on the things that are just very common practice, home ownership.
You're going to want this one way or another.
Yeah, exactly, right? Your furnace, your AC, those sorts of things.
When the question's asking all home renovations increase property value, there's also two ways to ask this. It's which renovations to do to increase or maintain property value if you plan on staying there, and then what renovation should you do if you plan on selling? Because if you plan on selling, cosmetic can be important, where you maybe replace some old trim, paint goes a long way, bathrooms, kitchens,
just make things
doing
consistent
things to spruce them up. Landscaping's huge. Like I would say for bang for your buck, landscaping, painting, bathrooms, countertops can go a long way.
No doubt.
But I would say furnace and roof and those things not necessarily always increase the value, but they maintain the value, right? You don't want your roof to get too old and start causing issues to start devaluing your property. You want to replace your roof to maintain its value. So sometimes you're paying 10-15 grand for a roof and you're not really increasing the value, you're just maintaining the value. Now if you were going to sell and you were doing a furnace, an AC, or a roof, or even a driveway, there is an argument that, okay, that's going to cost me $15,000. Do I want to pay the $15,000, or do I want to sell it knowing that someone may negotiate the 15, but maybe they only negotiate 5 or 10? Well, then you got a 30% discount or a 50% discount,
and you don't have to do
all the headache. So there is an argument that if you have a old furnace, rather than replacing the old furnace, you negotiate the fact that it has an old furnace and try and get a discount on your furnace without having to do the headache of the work. But if you're staying in the home and home and renovations increase value, going to what Christian's saying, sometimes somebody goes into a kitchen, they take out the countertops, they renovate the kitchen, they paint the walls, they change the floors, and then you go back in and it's really the same kitchen, it's just changed to their preference. So instead of white countertops, it's black countertops. Instead of laminate floors, it's vinyl floors. Instead of gray walls, it's beige walls. But in the end, it's still the same kitchen. It's just changed to that specific preference. But to the average person, it's still the same value to them. So you're spending a lot of money changing a bunch of things that really aren't really changing the home. They're just changing your preference. So
another thing I was thinking too is we had this come up not too long ago is someone had a unfinished basement. And actually, like, my in-laws were kind of debating this as well. And they were wondering if they should go and finish the basement in order to sell the house. And we were having that same argument where you might put, $50,000 into finishing this basement. But what if the next person comes in and goes, I actually don't want it the way you did it. And maybe those walls you put up to make a bedroom, they're like, I don't want that. I want one big open space. So there comes the argument, is it worth putting the effort and the money into it? Or should you just leave it and hope the right person comes along and appreciates it for what it is? So yeah, I think it's case by case scenario, but it's always a little tricky to figure out where that line is and what's important and what's not.
Yeah.
One of the questions here is, you can't buy a home without a realtor. That is not a myth. That's absolutely true. You cannot buy a home. Obviously you can purchase a home on your own. Realtors do add a lot of value if you have a realtor that's experienced and knows what to look out for and look out for your best interests. But absolutely, you could buy on your own if you wanted to. So we're going to pass through that one.
I will say, though, if you ask any one of our clients, I'm sure they'll tell you how great it is to work with a realtor and how much they really do help the experience and
absolutely
hold your hand through it all, and it makes it a lot easier. That's for sure.
I do believe that going through with somebody who's there for you, your own interests, rather than meeting with the agent who's in representation with the seller, it makes more sense to have your own representation. However, if you want to do real estate transactions on your own, you do have the option to do so. Home inspections are not necessary for new homes. I actually have had a lot of experience in having home inspections for new homes, and I've never done a home inspection on a new home that hasn't turned up something. So very commonly, new homes are built alongside many other houses. And there's a lot of trades coming in and out, doing different jobs at different times, and they're kind of tripping over each other. So you have electricians and plumbers and lots going on, and it's not one person doing everything in the home. And this is just another day at work for a lot of these tradespeople, and mistakes can happen. Now, they do have inspections along the way when it comes to plumbing, foundation, electrical, heating, cooling, all those things, but things can be missed. And very commonly, we have inspections on brand new homes, which is why you also have pre-delivery inspections where you go through them to ensure that the home is adequate for closing. But it's very common that we run into issues. But the nice thing about a new home is any of those issues that are found are usually covered under a Terran warranty. But it is always wise to still inspect a home. Just because it's new does not mean it's going to be perfect, and you should always get an inspection. Would you agree?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Colin, I'm going to go back. You can't buy a home with student loan debt. This is a good one because I know a lot of people that are always saying, yeah, I'm going to wait another year. I'm just trying to pay off my student loans.
Yeah. So this is another perfect example of getting ready early. Because what the student loan will do, it's perfectly fine, and almost anyone I've dealt with has debt of some sort, whether it's credit card, car loan, student loans. What happens is they take the monthly payment and they subtract it to what you would qualify for on the mortgage. So it's not going to break the application, but it may hold you back from qualifying for what you want. Now, the question I get asked all the time is, would it be better if I just paid this off? Now what would I get approved for? We have the calculators to do all that for you before you move any type of cash, because the last thing I would want someone to do is pay off a big student loan and then find out it's not going to do much to their mortgage.
Which a lot of times it doesn't.
And it doesn't.
It changes it a little bit, but it's not anything drastic.
No, and a lot of even the OSAP loans, you can do a very minimal payment, like $100, $200, $300. So in the grand scheme, it's not as bad when you go for your mortgage application, but we can stress test those, go through the application, no cost, and kind of give you different scenarios. So if you pay it off, or even if you pay it down halfway, what does that do? So
cool.
But big myth, and it does discourage a lot of people from starting the process.
And it's true. It's funny how many people are like, oh, I can't do this because I have this debt. And it's like, well, talk to anyone you know. They probably have debt too. Like it's so common nowadays. And yeah, it's one of those things. Have the conversation, because you really never know.
Yeah.
Christian, I got one for you here. Where was it? asking price is what the seller will accept.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is like, it's kind of like specific, I mean, to really anywhere here in Ontario, kind of, but I mean, here in Windsor specifically, let's just break it down to our case study alone. You know, naturally this can move either way, right? Not like just highly dependent on market conditions, but let's pretend we're in the thick of it. It's the spring market. You got a house that's listed at $599,000. This is where the importance of having those conversations with your buyers, setting expectations, prepping them before going out there on the on the battlefield and kind of getting an idea as to how this actually works. You know, depending on market conditions, if you have something that's, you know, it's moving and like the market is very well oiled at the time being, like a summer market, like a spring market. If you're listed at say $599 and when I came into the business, it was kind of a shock to me as well. You come to understand that, yeah, that $599 is nowhere close to where that seller actually is wanting to be. Meaning that, you know, they're listing at $599, but you're also, you know, capturing all of those buyers that are not only at that $600,000 price point, but now you're capturing some buyers that maybe are a little bit above, a little bit below, and you're kind of just trying to grab as many eyeballs as possible. And then you kind of see that price slowly start to tick up, especially when you have things set, such as a offer presentation. Because if you have 5-6 people putting in an offer at a home, well, naturally not everyone's going to put in $599. So, you know, that price will slowly tick up depending on the amount of action that property receives. But then similarly, you will also see, you know, certain times in the market where maybe I will take more of a traditional route and I'll list a little bit above my expectation and I'll have that opportunity to negotiate, kind of like an older style as to how things were going, you know, 10 years ago. Doesn't happen as often now, but certainly has. And I would say the last couple of months, I think you guys would agree, you're seeing it a little bit more. The unfortunate truth is oftentimes it's the low list strategy. And then the funnier part is when I have clients go into a $599 and then, you know, we'll pass on it for the time being, and then like 2 weeks later it'll be listed at like $660, and people will be like, I don't understand, it didn't sell at $599, why did they just up the price $60,000? And it's like, because they tried to get feet through the door, tried to get offers on the table, it didn't, you know, work out the way they wanted it to. So now they're taking more of that traditional route, which can be successful in certain instances, and others it pisses a lot of people off, and they'll be like, enjoy the you know, the cold stale market.
Very frustrating for buyers, and it's hard for them to understand if they're not used to the market, especially in these transition markets where things are changing. So old strategies and new strategies are being implemented. Good. It's really just supply and demand. You know, what a lot of the generation over the last, like, so let's say 10 years ago and beyond, would remember is supply was usually fairly high, especially in our area. Demand was not as high. I mean, every geographic location is going to have different markets, but the particular market we were in, blue collar town, usually high supply, lower demand, and the strategy when there's lower demand and high supply is usually to leave room to negotiate down and start high. So if you had a house that's worth $450, you might start even at $500 to leave room to negotiate, because buyers naturally are going to try and negotiate you down. But when demand picks up, it goes more into like an auction style bidding type strategy. So if you have a 500 or a 450 home, you might be listing it for $399 or even $349, and letting everybody negotiate the price upward to the end goal. So really, in the end, the list price is just a strategy, but different strategies are being implemented depending on supply and demand. Where right now, depending on the market, there's high demand in the low price, but more supply in the high prices. So you're seeing a mixture of everything, and it's kind of awkward out there, and buyers are obviously getting very frustrating.
I was having to make like phone calls prior to even going to see the property at the end of last year, just because I was like, there's such a mixed bag of tricks out there on the market right now that it's like, I have no idea what you want here. Like, I know where I see the value, but the difference between myself and your seller might be $50K. So I don't want to bring
make
my
sure we're
buyers.
On the same page first,
I don't want to bring my buyers through a house and like be like, all right, we love it, let's do it. It's listed at $629. I think we can get $9,000 off the price here. 3 days like later, it sells for like $6,000. You're like, boy, was that a waste of time? Like $40,000
Sellers don't want
away.
to give up 2022, and buyers don't want to give up 2023.
Yeah.
And we're kind of in a little in between. And yeah, it's interesting for sure, and it keeps keeps us always kind of keeping a pulse on everything that's
For
going
sure.
on.
Yeah.
Need to put a lot of money down to get a good deal. That's a stupid one. We're gonna skip that. Open houses are only for buyers. It means for everybody.
Yeah.
Krista, you wanna
Yeah. So I mean, open houses obviously are a good chance for sellers to show off their home to a large quantity of people at one time. There are some buyers that specifically just like do the rounds on weekends. That's what they do. So I mean, it gives the opportunity for people to come through. Also for us as realtors, gives us the opportunity obviously to meet new potential buyers or new potential clients. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's kind of beneficial for everybody around. Yeah, feedback. I mean, that's a good one too. Just to open your home up to the general public. We typically try to give out feedback sheets and get feedback from people that do visit the home, just so that we can even share it with the seller and be like, hey, even if you have no interest in this home at all, let us know what you think, just so we can give the seller that feedback. And then when the offers do come in, if they're not quite what the seller was looking for, we actually have reasons to justify what the general public thinks of the home. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits for sure to open houses for everybody. Yeah, so
You've done open houses with us. I mean,
for sure.
It's more convenient for buyers. And
Yep.
sellers sometimes to punch a bunch of people through within 2 hours is
Yep.
really good.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's always like, me and Collin actually talked about this when we did an open house together just before the holidays, and we were saying like it's nice to just even get out there and talk to people and see how people are feeling about the market in general, and just kind of get a feel for just how people are generally feeling about the whole situation, and if they're motivated and all that kind of stuff. So it's never a bad thing. It's always nice to just get kind of face to face with people and see how they're feeling.
I think that's my favorite. It's like you always get your sellers asking, how did that last showing go? And I'm also waiting for feedback, right? But when you're at the open house, you can say, well, we had 12 people through, and this is what they all said. We were right there. We can feel it. You can see their facial reactions to certain rooms, even if they don't say it out loud. You can kind of get a sense.
And
of the atmosphere.
I do feel with an open house, people are a little bit more candid. Like when you walk through them as like a private showing, I find people are a little bit more reserved. They don't want to offend anybody. They want to kind of be polite, whatever, understandable. Whereas when someone's just walking in off the street, they're like, I don't know you. I don't know the seller. I don't have an agent here. I don't care. I'm just going to tell you I hate this house. So it is kind of nice too, because you do get really honest feedback that way. And you get a mixed bag of people too, right? Like all different types, which is great because again, it's just more feedback in general for your sellers and for the people involved.
I'm going to throw another one at you here, Krista. You can't sell your home if it needs work.
So yeah, again, not true. So there's buyer out there for everything. It's funny, sometimes we actually see the ones that need the most work are the ones that get like 20, 30 offers. So yeah, just because a house needs work doesn't necessarily mean there's not a buyer out there for it. And again, especially when there's a lower price point attached to that, sometimes people get excited about the idea of what it could be. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes those houses actually end up doing way better than you would expect just because they get the action and they get so many people excited about the potential, I guess.
It's a good point. Going back to like the renovation question on like what renovation should you or should you not do and all that. Sometimes if a home needs a certain amount of work, it's better just to sell it as is and let the investors fight over it. It just depends on the expectation on price and what you're looking to achieve. If you're looking for a price that's unrealistic, then you might have to fix it up and do the things that you need to do to get it to value there. But just because it needs work, I mean, you don't have to go and slave away doing a bunch of work that's half-assed just for someone to come down and then knock you down on price because it's half-assed. But now they're renovating they're taking your renovation down and then paying the same price. You sometimes are better off.
It's funny, I just recently came across this where someone was having a hard time selling a house. They did a couple of minor cosmetic things. They updated the countertops, but just to like a laminate, nothing crazy or expensive. They painted some walls, like just very like lipstick on a pig for lack of better terms. And they now are expecting more money in the end, and they're like, well, we put money into it, and buyers are coming through and going like, okay, but what you did isn't exactly beneficial to me, and it's not like gaining value in the property. However, the seller's still looking at it like, I put money into this. So it's one of those things. Sometimes you're better off just letting it be what it is and letting somebody tell you what they think it's worth rather than going through the headache.
Collin. It's kind of a weird one, but I kind of want to go to it because there's some topics here that I want to touch on. You can't buy a home without a 30-year mortgage. Obviously, we know that's not true. But I would have thought the question would have been you can't buy a home without a 25-year mortgage. But now you can do 30. You can do all sorts of things. And I don't know, there's some new rule changes in regards to 30-year mortgages, but I guess it's kind of also touching on whether you can do 15, 10-year loans, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's funny enough from the chat GPT, the 30-year fixed and the 10-year fixed, that's actually drawing from the US information, because funny, like they do it a lot differently than we do. We have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year terms, and then you'll come up for renewal on your terms, where in the States it's 15 or 30 years, but their rules are different. They don't have breakage penalties and stuff like that. But with the 30-year amortization, that's your life of the mortgage. So whether you take a 4 or 5 or even a 3-year term, you can stretch out your payments over 25 years. And the government just announced last month, 2 months ago, that you can, for first-time home buyers, go up to 30 years now. So it used to be mandatory. 25 years was the maximum. Now you can go to 30 years, but again, there's pros and cons to it. By stretching it out, your payment's going to be cheaper, but the default insurance premium is going to go up a little bit. So it's still going to cost a little bit more, but it always comes down to the numbers. Run an application, see the difference between each scenario. It may help you, it may not. So
call Collin.
Yeah, call Collin.
It's always better to pay off your mortgage early. This is a weird one because I think that the general answer to this would be, it's good to pay off your mortgage. Whether you pay it off early, I think there's arguments whether that money can be allocated to other investments that might pay off higher rates of return than the interest that you're paying on your mortgage. But I guess piggybacking off this, is there any tips and tricks in doubling down on your mortgage, or ways, because they front load all the interest to the beginning of the mortgage term, is there ways to get more of that principal paid off and to maybe turn a 25-year more into like a 15 to 20 year if you put an extra certain amount down? I don't know if you have the figures right off the top of your head, but are there tips and tricks to helping pay down your mortgage early without, dumping a ton?
So this is a big topic, especially when people are coming in with rate shopping, or they're looking to get the best deal possible. Sometimes on the broker channel or even online, you'll get the vanilla mortgage where you can't do any additional payments. So you're basically contracted to just your regular mortgage payment, which works out for some people, but some people who have extra cash, or they know that they're going to be earning more or may run into an inheritance, they may want to chop down their mortgage. And any additional payments, so you can do a double up payment, which say your payment's $2,000 a month, you can increase it to $4,000, and that extra $2,000 goes right towards your principal, which chops down the balance, which chops down your amortization, and then you're going to pay a lot less interest to the bank. And then you can also do 10% lump sums each year. So say you started with a mortgage of $500,000, every single year you can put up to a maximum of $50,000 directly towards principal, chop down that balance. But it always comes down to opportunity costs, because as much as you can pay down your debt, you could also be investing in other avenues like stocks, crypto, you name it. And one other thing too is sometimes people use debt as a tool. So they may get their primary residence, refinance, take the equity out, so they're actually taking on more debt, but they know that they can use that as a tool to invest in other means. So it really depends on the person's situation. We grew up with our parents and grandparents say, be mortgage free, like before you retire, because when you're retired and you have a set income, you don't want to have a hefty mortgage payment or having to pay to live, where if you can eliminate that early, you'll be a lot easier off. But then other people argue, well, what if I sell my house and downsize? Then I'm recouping all that debt. So it depends how you look at it. Numbers are always a tool. So
I feel like almost every one of these questions has been wrapped up, which is kind of like have the conversation.
Exactly.
Every situation is different.
Questions, and they're like every other one's mortgage related. I'm like, they know Collin's.
But people talk to their friends and family, and then they get all these myths in their head.
Exactly.
And they get scared.
These are actually legit myths. These are a lot of questions we do run into all the time.
No doubt.
Every day.
You could do a whole other section of 20 of these. I'm going to give Christian and Krista one more each, and then we'll wrap it up here in a second. But this is an interesting one because, I don't know, there's some truth to it, but it's not always the truth. So, Christian, if a home doesn't sell quickly, it's overpriced. Yeah,
that's definitely, an interesting one for sure. I think that oftentimes you can attribute a house kind of laying stale and not selling to the listing price and kind of where your seller or where your agent is kind of seeing the value. But they, kind of mention it here. And I think it's probably the biggest thing for me personally. And like, I've gone through some of these houses in just the past couple of months here. And like, a house can be, absolutely beautiful, but it all comes down to, it's the who's looking at it, right? Yeah. And I think Walkerville specifically carries a lot of that. There's that, I'm blanking on the name.
One?
What?
The cobblestone one?
Yeah.
Or the Martin Homestead.
That's right. Yeah. So like properties such as that, are beautiful and amazing in so many different aspects. But, are they practical for the consumer who is viewing that property, right? Mm-hmm. So it can just be very subjective. You can have a house like we've talked about and kind of how we've hammered home on this podcast already is that you've done something or you're living in something that you love, but you may be, 1 in 100 in terms of taste, and that's totally okay. But just come to understand and just come to know that when the time comes to sell, I know you like and love the home that you have built for yourself, but it's for yourself. It is not for anybody else, right? Mm-hmm. It's personal to you. And that, it can be incredibly challenging for some sellers because naturally you build that, that relationship and that bond with you've built a family in it, or you've lived your entire life in this property and you build all that into it. But unfortunately, it doesn't always come out in the price and doesn't always come out in the wash. So just, make sure you kind of have those conversations as, with your agent prior to listing. Hey, do you kind of see my property swaying in one way or another in terms of subjectivity? And kind of getting a better understanding of how large is your demographic that's, going to be wanting to walk through and wanting to put offers on the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you said that perfectly. I mean, it really, sometimes you just have some that are needle in a haystack. It's nothing to do with price. Just trying to find the right
Just finding the right person. Yeah.
I'm going to do one really quick here. And then, Krista, I'm going to throw one over to you.
I know which one you're going to answer.
Which one? This one here?
No, I thought it was the haunted house one.
The haunted house one was fun. You can't sell a house if it's haunted. Oh, yes, you can.
Oh, yes, you can.
Joe has some experience.
Yeah. All real estate agents are alike. I'm not gonna sit here and bash the way other people do their business. I just think there's a lot of really good agents out there, but I think that there's a lot of different agents with different skill sets, and that's also what makes having a team so powerful. Is certain agents are better with like bedside manner, and some are better with catering to the needs and wants, where another agent might be focused more on the investment aspect to it and the resale aspect to it, and someone may be more just very number oriented, where somebody else is more cosmetic oriented. And it really depends on the buyer and what they're looking for. And I think there's a lot of great agents out there, and everybody has their different styles of doing things and negotiating styles. So really I have no issue with really any style, but I do want to bring up the fact that yes, there are a lot of different agents out there, but I think that's what makes the team awesome, is the fact that we have a whole bunch of different styles of business that come together and allow us to bump ideas off each other. And just want to put a little plug there for the team. I
think it's super cool too when, even a repeat buyer of yours comes back and they're looking to kind of start their search again, and you get talking to them and you go, oh, I know who they'd be perfect match with. And it's just nice that we have the whole group of us that we can all kind of figure out what
we're different in different ways. And there are some that where if they weren't to jive, we have other options on the team, and that doesn't typically happen. We usually have a good idea of how to pair them up. But what I even like is if somebody that I've worked with in the past that I had a really good relationship with, and they come to the team, and let's say you help them, and sometimes they have even a better relationship with you because your personality jives even better than my personality. And although they had a good
but now we're just creating this like big happy family. Like it's so nice.
I love it. So anyways, I saw that question. I thought it was interesting because there are a lot of different aspects to different agents, and every buyer is going to have a different taste in what they're looking for. Somebody who's more salesy and pushy is attractive to some people. It may not be for me, but I may want somebody who's more looking out for my real needs, wants, my kids' school districts and things like that. And I just love that we have a team that kind of caters to all those things. So that was, I wasn't going to go, but I saw that and I was like, oh,
I'll put a plug in for you guys too.
Hell yeah,
Anytime
let's
I
go.
deal with clients and I get a pre-approval and I say, are you working with a realtor? They say, you know what, I don't want to be pushed just yet.
Yeah.
And I always combat that and say, you know what, I got this team. They're great. They're not pushy. They're actually going to care for your needs.
Yeah.
They're there to help you. And we've had great experiences so far. So.
And that's one thing I think we can really pride ourselves on. Like our whole team, we really do want what's best for our clients, and we're likely going to talk you out of more houses than we'll talk you into.
Yeah,
like that's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
It creates more long nights, but it's enjoyable and it actually makes the experience. And what I mean by that is by turning down more houses and being more critical actually makes us
work harder
work harder and longer. But it's why we have such a deep referral base and advocate group, and it makes the job more rewarding, and it feels a lot better going home. You actually made a difference rather than just selling a house for the sake of selling a house, but you actually sold a house to create a good investment opportunity and home for your clients. So I'm just really happy with the group we have, and I just wanted to throw that plug in there. Krista, I'm not going to give you one that's on this list. I'm going to go back to one of the topics that we talked about one of our last podcasts, because I'm curious on yours, because you always have a fun spin on tastes and things. Your favorite old school style,
like finish,
like a finish that, like, let's say paneled walls or pink bathrooms, a style that was in the past that you hate, and a one that you love that wish you would come back. And we'll do one more. So one that you hate, one that you love, and a style right now that you hate.
Okay,
go.
So I'm a sucker for tile. I love walking into like a vintage bathroom and it's like ceiling to floor, like pink tile, like Christian was saying.
That's why I had to ask you, because I knew it. Yeah.
Like I love it. Like my favorite thing in the world.
Could not.
I know,
No.
and it's funny. Like I've had situations with clients where we walk in and I'm like so in love with the charm of a home. I'm like, oh, the original hardwood, the squeaks. Like I love all that stuff. And then they'll invite me back 6 months later and they're like, we put laminate over, and I'm like, oh. I mean, it looks great.
I'm gonna pause you for a second. Going back on the last one, if I have a client that comes to me and loves that stuff, they're not working with Christian.
Exactly. They're working with me. Exactly. And so it is super fun. Like whenever I do find clients that are like that, like it's great because we can just like geek out together because we're like, oh, look at all the charm. So that is really one of my favorite things. But it's funny because it's not for everybody. And like we were saying before. Yeah, see, and I'm like, no, I love this. Like, so it's funny. Like, I've seen some bathrooms that like they look like they could have been like a restoration of like a brand new bathroom that was using like old school traditions, because it's so pristine. And that is my absolute favorite thing, when someone has just had that like extreme pride of ownership and they've just taken such good care of it over the years. It's like a time capsule. Like I love that.
You're
it's
the
so
reason
exciting.
I still have the funky tile in the kitchen at the office.
It's funny. I have a couple clients that are like that too. Like there's certain things in their house they're like, I couldn't touch it because I knew it'd break your heart. I'm like, thank you so much. So no, it's definitely true. And I mean, I've even had situations where people are like, ew, I hate that light fixture. I'm like, well, when you get rid of it, just call me and I'll take it off your hands. So I mean,
Krista's got like the beaded doorways.
Oh no, like it's bad. Like I could
You're like a hippie at
I've
heart.
had situations where I've been like, do you think I could call the seller and see if they'd like leave that behind for me? Like it's a problem.
Now, what's a style that you're like, no, we could do without that one?
Yeah, I'm over the millennial gray. Like I think.
Oh, the millennial gray. Yeah,
that's definitely. I think a lot of people are starting to feel that way now, which is nice. So it's great. Like I'm coming into style now because my house is definitely not millennial gray.
Yeah. I like that it's called millennial gray. That actually makes sense.
I know.
That kind of sore spot.
It's
I
kind of
didn't know that.
sad. Yeah,
but honestly, that makes sense.
It is. It is.
Like there's gonna be a day where I'm walking in like, ugh, millennial gray.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, my biggest thing is it just looks so like sterile and like lifeless and like I don't know. No, our office is good. We've got greenery and stuff. But yeah, no, there's some houses that are just so like stark and so like again,
but it's gray
sterile.
on white on white on white.
Yeah, like that's the thing. And I mean, like my cabinets in my house are gray. I purposely did it with knowing that I was going to make the rest of my house colorful, and knowing that if I do sell my house one day, hopefully the cabinets themselves will be neutral enough that someone can work around them, right? So like I try and think of that kind of stuff too.
I think you're in good company, because I think every time we ask this question, somebody has the same like millennial gray. I think Miranda made the comment on the last one. And she was getting a lot of love on social media because everybody was like behind her, like down with gray. Let's go.
Yeah.
But what about an old school style as somebody who appreciates like that, you're like, nah, I could do without that. Like you walk in, you're like, no, that's got to go. Like the jacuzzi tub in the master bedroom.
You know what? I hate to say it. Like I can't even really pick one because I feel like in a weird way, like there's a spot in my heart for all of it. I know I really was. You know what? I really was. Like, okay, so we just had a client recently and we went to their house. Their house was built in like the 90s and we realized that their house address was actually like real tube neon. Like it wasn't just like an LED, like it was actual legit neon. And at first we were like, oh, that's kind of weird. And then the more we thought about it, we're like, that's actually so cool. That's like, it's like, you never see that, right? So it's one of those things, I think, just looking at those things and appreciating them for what they are. And, you know, if it's not for you, that's fine too. But
you know that house,
I think
you know
it's
that
cool.
house that is not overpriced but is struggling to sell, that's your house.
Yeah. That's the one I want. That's the one we're looking for.
I feel like but legitimately though, I think you have a good like balance within that taste.
Yeah,
You add a little funk and pizzazz to like modern stuff too.
Yeah. Like I said, even with my own house, I try to think about what also was going to be valuable in resale. But I know that paint is cheap and fun, so it's like I have fun with it where I can. Yeah, I like color.
That's not a bad thing.
No,
everybody wants to be gray.
Exactly. Well, and I'll give myself a little shout out. I did go to school for fashion design, so I do like to kind of incorporate things like that when I can.
That's true.
So yeah, like and I find interior design and stuff like that is just another way to like kind of express myself. So I do like doing that.
Well, I think this was actually a pretty informative. We went through quite a bit of topics here.
Yeah.
Sure did.
We're gonna wrap it up here. Colin, before I wrap it up, any plugs you want to throw at us or?
Call the Joe Conlon team.
Collin Bosse, RBC Mortgages, Joe Conlon team, Krista Kingston, Christian Conlon, and Joe Conlon Real Estate team. Okay, peace out. Bye.